Hey, I'm Richard Matthews. I run a wealth management firm in downtown Greenville and Fountain Inn, South Carolina. I've shot tons of videos on market trends, planning strategies, and financial education, and honestly, at this point, I've just talked too much. I'm bored of the sales pitches I hear in financial media, so now I'm interested in what other local financial experts are thinking about in the upstate South Carolina economy and markets on the No Nonsense Investor. Hey, we're here at Cucina 100 here in Fountain Inn, and the people who work here, they're very hardworking people, and they're gracious enough to let us be here and use their space. So when you come to Fountain Inn, if you want some good Italian food, some good drinks, stop in. You might actually see me here. But today we're here with Tom Steiner. Tom, thank you for showing up and being willing to tell your story. I know who you are, but why don't you tell everybody else? Who are you?
Sure. So I've been in the upstate over 20 years or so, moved away for a little bit and came back. This is my home, but certainly got an engineering background, worked for a global company, but getting into that season of retirement, and so just starting to look at what I need to do to get ready for that. To me, it's not really just pure retirement, it's kind of moving on, right?
Yeah.
To a new season of life and what God has in store for me.
Awesome, very good. So we're going to go through kind of some discussion points here, and we're going to end up with a challenge question. Okay. So first thing, you mentioned you were getting ready to retire. So what exactly did that look like when you were interested in that?
Well, probably it starts, is your work, right? I've got 40 years with pretty much my company, and you start to see other folks retire, and as I get into late 50s, mid to late 50s, you start thinking, well, what's that going to look like for me? Because you get reminders of it all the time. And I'm kind of in that season now, 60 to 65, and so I really started thinking, hey, I really need to get serious about this and decide what that's going to look like, and how do I manage what I've been able to save through various options and so forth, and what do I need to do to kind of set myself up for that.
Awesome. So that process, walk us through the process of how you built out what the questions were, what the variables were, what mattered to you. And how did you start making those first steps in preparing?
Well, it kind of started with what do I have to work with, right? And like a lot of people, I've got different buckets of money. Money I've set aside in like 401ks. I'm still blessed to have a pension, and actually in a situation because my company had been bought and sold a couple times, I actually had 2 pensions to work with. So starting to look at those big buckets and just say, so what's that going to look like, and how do I want to manage those? Some of those buckets, like one of those pensions was pretty much fixed. After age 62, it was fixed and wasn't going to change, so that's kind of a fixed number, but the other one was variable, kind of on when I'd make my decisions, as well as obviously 401k, lots of options there. So started to think about, well, what am I going to do with that, and how do I structure that to set myself up for the retirement years? And that started, like I say, several years ago, and as the days getting closer, just really started focusing in on those decisions that I had to make.
Awesome, and that is super rare. We don't typically see people with 2 pensions anymore, one defined benefit, one defined contribution. We're here in the upstate of South Carolina. We've got tons of manufacturing. We've got Michelin, BMW, Grainger, AVX, all of these companies around here. There are quite a few remaining pensions, and I think that was where it got very interesting on how to take a look at those pensions. So 401ks, those are fairly common, whether to roll them, etc. But pensions, as you mentioned, the defined benefit, it's really what is this amount we're going to pull? Is there going to be a spousal remainder, and then just make your call there. But when we get into a pension that's a defined contribution, that throws another curveball at you, right? So what was it about that defined contribution pension that became interesting as you started to study?
Well, like I said, one of the pensions was fixed, and after 62 there was no penalty for early with retirement or anything like that. So that was pretty much, like I say, fixed. But the other one, there were options, as you mentioned. So there was a lump sum option, as well as just an annuity option, of course, and then survivor benefits and all that. But if the other piece was, that one didn't really mature till 65, so if you retired earlier, there was some penalty for that, and especially in the annuity side and what it was going to be worth. So I started to look at those options. Fortunately, our company provided some calculators on their website to just look at that. So I started playing with various scenarios. You know, do I retire at 62? What does that look like? Well, if I do 63, what does that look like? 64, 65. So I just started running those options and to see what that looked like.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was most interesting is you built an Excel spreadsheet, being the engineer that you are,
Right.
and graphed this out so that you could visually see what these different options looked like over time. So you weren't concerned with, you know, hitting 65 and then just that year. You're looking at a long-term picture, which you know, a lot of clients get the concept behind, you know, if I die too early or too late, there's a crossover point, and you know, it's useful to think about with that. But one of the things that we talked about initially was trying to figure out the internal rate of return on those annuity options off of what that lump sum would look like.
Right.
So internal rate of return, what is it that you thought was most important out of that calculation?
Yeah, so one thing, kind of back on the Excel spreadsheet thing, you know, that was mainly just looking at the annuity options and kind of the accumulated. And that crossover point, 63 versus 65, I think came like at age 87. So I say, hey, these, you know, work 2 more years and it really isn't going to catch up for, you know, 20, 25 more years. Is that really what I want to do, type thing? And so I said, you know, probably not. And hey, I need to start thinking about, hey, let's look more at 63 and get serious. But then as I started looking at kind of the lump sum option, it really got interesting because that value would change month to month depending on the month that I retire. And so as I started running options, I saw, hey, there's a big inflection point starting next year. And, you know, kind of the discussion we had about, hey, look at the rate of return. I said, hey, why is that changing? The annuity wasn't changing, but the lump sum was. What's going on here? And so I started looking at that and did kind of backward calculation. Hey, what's the rate of return? And what's really happening is, based on the company's valuations and interest rates on that annuity, there was a huge impact on the lump sum distribution. And so I said, I need to understand that. So I called the pension company to make sure, you know, or our human resources group at work to make sure I understood, hey, this is what I'm really seeing, and it was. And then I talked to you, Richard, and said, hey, is this what I'm really, am I thinking about this the right way? And does that really change? Am I better to go with the annuity or the lump sum? So it was all about kind of looking at those numbers and figuring out what's going on here and looking at the rate of return. And it's pretty straightforward way to do it. I looked on Google and found a real simple way to calculate that and kind of figured it out, and that helped drive some decisions that we wanted to make.
Yeah, so the old saying of, you know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I mean, if you get into the backward working of how a net present value is created for your lump sum, interest rate is key, right? And for the past 12 years now, we've had 0% interest, and so that was pretty much the maximum lump sum if you're calculating off of a benefit from an annuity payment. So as this year, 2022, we've started again launching our interest rate hikes, and we're 2.5% now federal funds rate. So how did that affect your lump sum option?
It was a very significant amount, like 20% difference in that lump sum.
Up or down?
Down. So interest rates were going up starting next year is kind of how they were calculated. So that was like a 20% impact on that. And that was kind of the other thing I got to thinking about. So what are my sources of income? Well, I had this other pension that's pretty much just a fixed annuity, right? And I guess you can consider Social Security kind of a fixed annuity as well. So I said, hey, do I want to have everything in that fixed bucket? And I talked to some other advisors around, and that was kind of their recommendation from a 401k, just put it in this fixed annuity. And the thought was, well, do I want all those fixed income sources because inflation's going to come in? And so I thought, hey, it might be good to get some more in just kind of that cash lump sum that then we could have other options with to invest to better keep up with inflation.
Right, and it's just diversifying your income stream. So,
certainly,
so we want to have a variable reference income source as well as a fixed one, which, you know, that you don't basically have sold the risk off to an insurance company. But yeah, I mean, that's the key, I think, is to be aware of how what's happening now in response to inflation by raising rates is actually affecting people's ability to keep up with inflation on the variable aspect of income generation. So it's incredibly rare to find a client who has gone to these lengths of trying to build out a model and understand what the importance of income is. Income is way more important than assets, but you know, to be able to have a variable source of income, it's refreshing to come across engineering type clients that like this type of thinking and like to be able to address every single detail along the way, because I mean 20% of your future income was at stake, and you managed to catch that early. So tell us a little bit about what you did kind of on your own initiative, walking up through. You said HR is who you reached out first.
Right.
How did that go?
It went fine. You know, I had a couple different times I'd run through some scenarios and had some questions, and I found a couple times, sometimes the feedback I got was inconsistent depending on who I was talking to, so I called more than once. Certainly on some 401k questions as well as this pension, just to make sure I was understanding it the right way, and not misinterpreting what I'm seeing. And so certainly overall that was a good resource, but you know, felt like, hey, so I need to take that and then get some other help to make sure I'm thinking about this the right way and understanding the effect of my decisions, because, you know, a lot of these are kind of one-time decisions that you got to make and about your funds and how you're going to structure it for the future. So just want to get input from a lot of good sources to help. At the end of the day, I got to own it. I got to make that decision for myself and my family, but certainly getting some counsel from others has really been a good thing to help me along that process.
Nice. So you were willing to take on the problem-solving aspect, and I think that's the key here. So if you were to, this is a challenge question. So if you were to give, you know, your take, talking to everybody that's listening here on what they should focus on as that time approaches, as whether it's 5 years, 1 year, 10 years away, what is most important for people out there to consider as they are, I guess, nearing retirement?
Well, a couple things. It goes way back to kind of the core foundation of who I am and what I believe. And it starts with, I'm a steward. I'm not an owner. You know, what I've got is what God's given me, and He's asked me to steward it and steward it well, so I want to do that. And there's some great principles in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes about that. One is Proverbs 27:23. Know the condition of your flocks. Well, for me, that's my retirement bucket. I need to know and understand that. I can't ignore it. And so that was kind of the first step. And then certainly you can see through literature, online, a lot of stuff's out there about what to do and how to do it, but sometimes there's too many choices. But some key principles are, hey, you know, don't put it all in one place. Spread it around, because you really don't know the future, so you'll spread it around. And then finally, the other one is then going back, get some good counsel, right? And I self-managed it for quite a few years, but as the time's getting close, I really said, hey, I'm going to need some help, because it's more than just the pot of money. It's, well, what about taxes? What about estate planning? Put all that together and talk to some, you know, kind of talk to other entities that kind of help with financial management, and some kind of seem to be focused just on one thing. And I wanted to try to find some resources that kind of help me look at the full picture, to really understand, hey, what with the assets I have to steward, what's that going to look like for this new season of life called retirement, and how long, you know, will my resources last to support myself, my family, and that type of thing.
Yeah, so, there are tons of variables. It's astounding to me that you've been able to kind of, it's taken me 17 years to get to where you can really start to mesh all this together, but on your own initiative, you probably built 80% of it on your own. That last little 20% of, did you think about this? Well,
but that's really important, right? Because as you build the 80, questions come up, and well, you can ignore them or hope for the best, or get some help to get better answers and get to 95% plus, you know, idea of, hey, this is kind of what it's going to look like. So that's really been the goal.
Very good. Well, I want to thank Tom for stopping in and sharing his story. It's a powerful story of somebody with initiative to start to learn all of this. But our hope here at the No Nonsense Investor is to be able to talk to people about real world issues that affect their lives here in the upstate. So follow us around the upstate as we continue to do these interviews and discuss things that matter to us so that we can help manage the wealth of our local community and invest in people who invest in themselves. So stick around and we'll see you next time.